The human galactic war had been going on for 3 hard years. Everyone thought Earth was losing badly. The hegemony aliens had more ships, better weapons, and stronger shields. Earth's small fleet kept retreating after each battle. The aliens laughed at how weak humans seemed. Deep inside Jupiter's storms, something big was hidden. The TSS Defiance floated silently in the gas giant's clouds. This was humanity's secret weapon, a massive ship 4 times larger than any vessel humans had ever built before. Commander Kim Ji-won walked slowly across the main observation deck. The large windows showed only swirling orange and red gases outside. She stopped at the central command station, where screens displayed the ship's systems. 3 years of waiting, she whispered to herself. 3 years of letting them think we're weak. The deck hummed with quiet activity. Officers moved between stations, checking readings and preparing systems. Everyone spoke in hushed tones, as if he can hear they might be discovered. "Commander on deck," someone called, and the room briefly paused before returning to work. Ji-won's uniform was crisp and dark blue with silver rank pins. Her black hair was pulled back tightly. She had not slept well for days. The weight of 50,000 lives rested on her decisions. "Status report," she said, eyes fixed on the main holographic display. The blue light reflected on her face as data scrolled past. First Officer Lee Shunho approached with a tablet. He was tall with broad shoulders and a serious expression. "All systems are working perfectly, Commander. All crew at their stations. The gravitic masking field is stable. We remain completely hidden from enemy sensors." Ji-won nodded. "Engine status. Main drives at full power. Jump drive charged and ready. Weapons. All weapon systems online. Missile bays loaded. Energy cannons charge." Ji-won walked to the tactical display. It showed Jupiter and its moons, with red dots marking known hegemony patrol ships. None were close to their position. "And our fighters?" she asked. "All 500 fighters ready to launch. Pilots on standby." The Defiance was more than just a big ship. It represented humanity's true abilities. While sending outdated ships to battle, Earth's best scientists had worked in secret facilities across the solar system. They studied captured alien technology and made it better. They combined it with human innovation to create weapons and defenses the hegemony couldn't imagine. "The aliens think they know what humans can do," Engineering Chief Park had once told her. "They've never seen what humans can do when our backs are against the wall." Ji-won turned to look at the crew working around her. For 3 years, they had trained in silence. They had said goodbye to families without telling them where they were going. Some had children who were born after they left, children they had never seen. "How's the crew holding up?" she asked Tuno. "Eager to fight, Commander. Morale is high." A young communications officer approached. "Commander Kim, we're receiving a transmission from Earth Command. Priority channel." Ji-won straightened her uniform and walked to the communications station. The screen showed Admiral Han, his face serious. "Commander Kim," he said, his voice clear despite being transmitted across millions of kilometers. "The hegemony fleet has begun their final push toward Earth. They believe our defenses are failing. Are we ready, Admiral?" "Yes, the time has come." Admiral Han looked down at something off-screen, then back up. "Authorization code. Thunderclap. Operation is approved. You are cleared to proceed." Ji-won's heart beat faster. This was it. After years of planning, waiting, and preparing, they would finally reveal Earth's true strength. "Acknowledged, Admiral. Operation Thunderclap commencing." The transmission ended. Ji-won stood still for a moment, then turned to face the bridge crew. Everyone had stopped working to watch. They knew what the code meant. "All hands," she said, and her voice carried through the ship's speakers to every deck, every corridor, every room where crew members waited. "This is Commander Kim. Operation Thunderclap is now active. Prepare to leave Jupiter's atmosphere and engage jump drives." Activity exploded across the bridge as officers rushed to their stations. Alarms sounded throughout the ship, not in warning but to alert everyone to battle stations. Navigation, plot course to the hegemony homeworld. Juwan ordered. Will emerge directly above their capital. Course plotted, Commander. The navigation officer replied. Tactical, prepare all weapons systems. Will launch fighters immediately upon arrival. Yes, Commander. Juwan walked to the captain's chair at the center of the bridge and sat down. Screens surrounded her position, showing all ship systems. Engineering, prepare for atmospheric exit. Full power to engines. Engines ready, Commander. Communications, send final status report to Earth Command. Let them know we're moving out. Junho took his position at her right side. This is really happening, he said quietly. Yes, it is, Juwan replied. Today we show the galaxy that humans aren't to be underestimated. The giant ship began to move, rising slowly through Jupiter's thick atmosphere. Gas clouds parted around its massive hull. The gravitic masking field kept them hidden, bending light and sensor readings around the vessel. Approaching upper atmosphere, the navigation officer reported. Juwan looked at the main view screen. Soon, they would see stars. Communications, prepare a message to be broadcast on all frequencies once we reach the hegemony homeworld. Ready, Commander. When we arrive, Juwan said, I want them to hear these words. This is TSS Defiance of Earth. Your war ends today. The bridge crew smiled. After years of hiding, they would finally show the hegemony what humans could do. Exiting atmosphere in 30 seconds, navigation announced. Juwan took a deep breath. Operation Thunderclap begins now. For Earth. The hegemony capital world glowed with celebration lights. Tall buildings sparkled with colored displays showing battle victories. In the central plaza, thousands of aliens gathered to watch fireworks burst in the night sky. Music played as they celebrated the coming end of the war with humans. High Counselor Merrick raised his arms to the crowd. Soon, the Earth will surrender. Their pitiful resistance is at an end. The crowd roared with approval. They believed humans were weak and primitive. 3 years of battle had proven it. The small Earth ships always retreated. Their weapons were no match for hegemony technology. In the Grand Palace overlooking the city, military leaders drank special beverages and laughed about human tactics. They shared stories of battles where Earth forces fled rather than fight. Their ships are so basic, one commander said. It's almost sad to destroy them. Their world will make a fine colony, another replied. The night sky suddenly lit up with a flash brighter than any firework. A massive tear opened in space directly above the capital city. The celebration music stopped. Everyone looked up as something enormous emerged from the tear. Alarms blared throughout the city. Emergency signals interrupted the celebration broadcasts. The Hegemony Defense Network detected an unknown vessel of impossible size. On the palace observation deck, military leaders rushed to see what was happening. Their drinks fell forgotten to the floor as they stared upward in shock. The TSS Defiance hung in the sky like a metal moon. Light glinted off its dark hull. Weapon ports opened along its sides. Launch bays revealed themselves as doors slid aside. Inside the Defiance's bridge, Commander Kim Juwan stood calmly at the center of a storm of activity. Officers called out reports as screens showed the panicked hegemony capital below. We have achieved complete surprise, reported Tactical Officer Baz Subin. Her fingers moved quickly across her console. Their defense grid is activating, but slowly. They were not prepared for this. Juwan nodded. Perfect. Begin Phase 2. She turned to the flight operations station. Chief Park, launch all fighter squadrons. Full deployment. Park Minho, a stocky man with quick hands, pressed his command sequence. Launching fighters now, Commander. Throughout the massive carrier, pilots ran to their ships. Launch tubes lit up with guide lights. Engines powered on in perfect sequence. The first wave of Earth fighters shot from the Defiance like bullets from a gun. They were sleek, black crafts with blue engine glows. Unlike the bulky fighters the hegemony had seen before, these moved with incredible speed and precision. Wave after wave poured from the Supercarrier, 100, 200, 500 ships. They formed attack patterns and descended toward key targets. On the hegemony's main defense station, controllers scrambled to respond. Warning lights flashed across every console. Unidentified human vessel above the capital. One controller shouted, "Size reading must be an error. It's showing as 4 kilometers long." "That's impossible," the station commander replied. "Human ships are never larger than 1 kilometer." "Sir, they're launching fighters, hundreds of them." In the city below, the celebration turned to panic. People ran for safety as fighter craft streaked overhead. The fighters didn't fire on civilians, instead targeting military installations with precise strikes. Back on the Defiance, Ba Suvin monitored the tactical situation. "The enemy is scrambling their defense fleet, Commander. 7 capital ships launching. They appear disorganized." Jiwan allowed herself a small smile. "Of course they are. They thought we were weak." She turned to her first officer. "Li, prepare the quantum displacement drive." First Officer Li Shunho nodded. "Ready, Commander." They have no idea what's about to hit them. Li typed commands into his console. Deep within the Defiance, a special engine began to hum. It was technology the hegemony had never seen. The ability to shift portions of space itself. In orbit around the planet, the hegemony defense fleet formed up. 7 large warships with escort vessels moved to attack position. They had destroyed many human ships before. They believed this would be no different. The fleet commander opened fire first. Energy weapons and missiles launched toward the Defiance. The humans had never shown shields that could withstand such an attack. But the shots never hit. Just before impact, the space around the Defiance rippled. The Supercarrier seemed to shift slightly to the left, then right, not moving but somehow changing position without moving. Every shot missed. On the bridge of the hegemony flagship, Grand Admiral Xenoth stared at his display in disbelief. He had commanded the war against humans from the beginning. He had studied their technology, their tactics. He thought he knew everything about human capabilities. "How?" he whispered as his weapons failed to hit their target. "How did we miss this?" His tactical officer looked up with fear in his eyes. "Sir, we're detecting energy readings from the human vessel. Nothing like we've seen before." On the Defiance, Juwan gave her next order. "Target their flagship. Show them what we can do." A single beam of blue-white energy shot from the Defiance. It connected with the hegemony flagship's shields. For a moment, the shields glowed brightly as they tried to resist. Then they failed completely. The beam cut across the ship's command section with surgical precision. All command systems on the flagship went dead. The ship drifted powerless, its engines silent. "Direct hit," Bai announced. "Their flagship is disabled. Not destroyed, just as you ordered." Jiwan nodded. "We're not here to kill. We're here to end this war." She looked at the remaining enemy ships. "Target the engines on the other vessels. Disable, don't destroy." One by one, the hegemony warships lost power. Earth fighters danced around them, avoiding defensive fire with impossible maneuvers while targeting weapon systems with precise shots. Grand Admiral Xenoth held onto a railing as his ship's emergency lights came on. His crew looked to him for orders, but he had none to give. "Their fighters move like nothing I've seen," his second-in-command said. "And that technology, shifting space itself." Xenoth watched the screens as his fleet became helpless. The humans had hidden their true strength. They had let the hegemony believe they were winning, while building this monster of a ship. "We were fools," Xenoth said quietly. "We thought we knew what humans could do." The hegemony capital was quiet now. The celebration lights were off. The streets were empty. People watched from windows as human fighters patrolled the skies. The great defense fleet that had protected them for centuries now drifted powerless in orbit. Inside the Defiance, Commander Kim Ji-won stood before the main view screen. The bridge crew worked quietly around her. They had achieved complete surprise. The enemy fleet was disabled. The capital lay defenseless below them. "What are your orders, Commander?" First Officer Lee asked. "Should we begin landing operations?" Ji-won shook her head. "No, we didn't come here to conquer." She looked around at her crew. "We came to end this war." She turned to the communication station. "Officer Kang, open a channel to their leadership council." Kang Dongmu, a young officer with quick fingers, worked his controls. "Finding their emergency frequency now, Commander." After a moment, he looked up. "Channel open. You're connected to their council chamber." Ji-won took a deep breath and straightened her uniform. The crew watched as she prepared to address the aliens who had tried to conquer Earth. 3 years of hiding, of planning, had led to this moment. "This is Commander Kim Ji-won of the Earth Defense Force," she said clearly. Her voice was firm, but not angry. "Your military forces have been disabled. Your capital is undefended. We could destroy it now, but that is not our way. I offer terms for negotiation." The main screen flickered, then showed the Hegemony Council chamber. 7 alien leaders sat at a curved table. Their skin was pale blue, with ridges along their heads instead of hair. They wore elaborate robes with symbols of office. Behind them stood military advisors and other officials. The fear on their faces was clear. Some looked angry. Others simply shocked. High Counselor Merrick leaned forward. "You deceived us," he accused. His voice shook slightly. "You pretended to be weak while building this." He gestured at nothing, meaning the Defiance itself. "We protected ourselves," Ji-won replied calmly. "For decades we've studied technology from your crashed vessels, preparing for the day you discovered Earth. We value peace, but we will not be subjugated." The council members looked at each other. One whispered to another. Merrick's face showed his confusion. "Crashed vessels?" Another counselor asked. "What crashed vessels?" "Your scout ships," Ji-won said. "They have been visiting Earth for over 70 years. Some crashed in remote areas. We recovered them, studied them, learned from them." The counselors looked genuinely surprised. Ji-won realized they might not have known about the early scouting missions. "Your policy toward lesser species is well known," she continued. "You find developing worlds, take their resources, and keep them from advancing. We decided not to let that happen to Earth." The council chamber erupted in angry voices. Some counselors shouted at each other. Others pointed accusingly at the screen. Merrick finally raised his hands for quiet. "What are your terms, Commander?" he asked stiffly. "First, the war ends now. All hegemony forces withdraw from the Sol system immediately. Second, we will meet to discuss a formal peace treaty. Third, Earth will be recognized as a sovereign power with all rights of a major species." The demands hung in the air. The counselors looked shocked at the boldness. "You expect us to treat humans as equals?" one counselor asked, clearly offended by the idea. "Yes," Ji-won said simply. "I believe we've proven we are your equals." She let the statement sink in. The massive carrier above their capital was proof enough. After a long silence, Merrick spoke. "We will need time to discuss these demands." "You have 1 hour," Ji-won replied. "After that, we will disable your planetary defense grid. Not destroy it. Disable it." The screen went blank as Ji-won ended the transmission. The bridge crew looked at her with respect. No one had ever spoken to the Hegemony Council that way before. "Do you think they'll agree?" Lee asked quietly. "They don't have much choice," Ji-won replied. "But they need to save face. We'll give them their hour." The hour passed slowly. On the Defiance, the crew remained at battle stations. Fighter patrols continued around the capital. Engineers repaired minor damage from the brief battle. Exactly 1 hour later, the communication system chimed. "Incoming transmission from the Hegemony Council," Kang announced. On screen, Juwan ordered. The council appeared again. They looked more composed now, though still clearly unhappy. "We will agree to peace talks," Marek said stiffly, "but not on your vessel. We will meet on neutral ground." Juwan had expected this. "No, the talks will be held on the Defiance. We will guarantee your safety. You may bring a reasonable security detail." There was another pause as the counselors whispered among themselves. "Very well," Marek finally said. "We will send representatives in 6 hours." The screen went blank again. The bridge crew exchanged glances. They agreed rather quickly, Lee observed. "They're planning something," Juwan said. "Tactical. Maintain full sensor suites. I want to know if they try to reactivate any weapon systems." 6 hours later, a small hegemony shuttle approached the Defiance. Security teams met it in the main hangar bay. 8 council representatives, including Marek, stepped out with a small security detail. Chief Diplomat Choi Hyun greeted them. He was older than most of the Defiance crew, with gray in his hair and calm eyes. He bowed slightly. "Welcome aboard the TSS Defiance," he said. "I am Chief Diplomat Choi. I will represent Earth's interests in these talks." The aliens looked around the massive hangar bay with clear surprise. Human technology was not supposed to be this advanced. The fighter craft lined up neatly along the walls were unlike anything they had seen in battle. "This way, please," Choi said, leading them toward the conference room. The meeting room was large, with a round table at its center. Windows looked out into space, showing the hegemony homeworld below. It was a deliberate choice, to remind them of their vulnerable position. Once everyone was seated, Choi began. "For 3 years, you have attacked our ships, bombed our colonies, and threatened our homeworld. Today that ends. You hid your true strength," one counselor accused. "You deceived us about your technological level." Choi nodded. "Yes, we did. Because we knew your history. For 2,000 years, the hegemony has controlled this region of space. Any species that shows promise is either conquered or restricted." He activated a display showing historical records, planets that had been stripped of resources, species forced into servitude. "We hoped to join the galactic community as equals," Choi explained. "Your policy of technological suppression of lesser species forced our hand. We had to hide our true capabilities until we were ready." "How did you build this vessel without our knowledge?" another counselor asked. "Our sensors should have detected it. The same way we've been studying your technology for decades without you knowing," Choi replied. "Humans are very good at keeping secrets when necessary." The meeting continued for hours. Tempers flared at times. Accusations were thrown. But slowly, progress was made. The hegemony representatives began to understand that humans were not like other species they had encountered. As the first day of talks ended, Marek approached Choi privately. "Your commander, Kim," he said quietly. "She could have destroyed our capital. Why didn't she?" Choi smiled slightly. "Because that's not who we are. Humans don't want to rule the galaxy. We just want our place in it." Marek looked thoughtful as he returned to the shuttle. Perhaps, he thought, there was more to learn about humans than their weapons. The peace talks had been going on for 5 days. Progress was slow but steady. Each morning, the hegemony representatives arrived by shuttle. Each evening, they returned to their planet to report to their full council. Humans and aliens were learning to talk to each other instead of fighting. Commander Kim Juwan watched from her office as Diplomat Choi led today's session. On screen, she could see the hegemony delegates actually nodding at something Choi said. It was a good sign. "We might actually achieve peace," she said to First Officer Lee, who stood beside her. "Some of them seem reasonable," Lee agreed, "but not everyone wants peace." He was right. Reports from the planet showed protests in some cities. Military leaders who had lost face when their fleet was disabled were calling for renewed fighting. They claimed humans couldn't be trusted. In the diplomatic section of the Defiance, the morning meeting was going well. Maps of trade routes were displayed on screens as both sides discussed future cooperation. High Counselor Marek was speaking. These terms are acceptable. We can begin scientific exchanges next month. Security Chief Ojisu was not in the meeting room. She was in the security center nearby, watching feeds from cameras throughout the ship. Something felt wrong today. She had learned to trust her feelings. Run another scan of the diplomatic section, she ordered her team. Full spectrum. A young security officer tapped commands into his console. Nothing unusual, Chief, just the delegates and our people. Jisoo frowned. Check their equipment. Did we scan everything they brought aboard? Yes, Chief. Standard procedure. She tapped her fingers on the console, thinking. Then she had an idea. Check for unusual power signatures. Anything that doesn't match normal equipment. The officer ran the scan. His eyes widened. There's something. Small power sources in the walls of room D7. That's not on any equipment list. Jisoo looked at the readings. Her heart jumped. Those are detonators. She hit the emergency comm button. Commander, bombs in diplomatic section. In the meeting room, everyone heard the alarm. Diplomat Choi looked up in confusion. What's happening? The room's speaker came alive with Commander Kim's voice. All personnel, evacuate diplomatic section immediately. This is not a drill. Panic broke out. Human staff began moving toward exits. The hegemony delegates looked confused and suspicious. It's a trick, one alien shouted. They're going to arrest us. Marek stood up. What is the meaning of this? Choi grabbed his arm. No time to explain. We need to move now. Security teams rushed into the room. Everyone out. Follow evacuation route Alpha. In the security center, Jisoo stared at the readings. Multiple explosive devices. They're set to detonate in less than 2 minutes. She ran from the center toward the diplomatic section. As she rounded a corner, she saw people streaming out of the meeting rooms. Humans and aliens pushed together in the corridor. Move faster, she shouted. Get to the emergency shuttles. In the command center, Juwon watched the evacuation on screen. How many devices? At least 12, a tactical officer replied. Spread throughout the diplomatic section. Can we disarm them? Not in time, Commander. Juwon hit her comm button. Science Officer Yang, we need containment fields in the diplomatic section now. Yang Jun was already running toward the area with a portable field generator. On my way, Commander. The evacuation continued. Most people were out now, moving toward the safe areas. Yang pushed against the flow, heading toward danger instead of away from it. 1 minute to detonation, came the warning in his earpiece. Yang reached the main conference room. It was empty now. He placed his device in the center of the table and activated it. A blue field began to form around the room. Containment field at 40%, he reported. I need more power. In engineering, technicians diverted emergency power to Yang's device. The field grew stronger, spreading to nearby rooms. Field at 70%, Yang reported. It's not enough to contain all devices. Juwon made a quick decision. Focus the field on the outer hull sections. We can repair internal damage. Yang adjusted the field. The blue glow moved, concentrating around the outer rooms. 30 seconds, came the warning. Everyone out now, Juwon ordered. Yang, leave the device and run. Yang set the final parameters and sprinted down the corridor. He joined the last few people heading for the safe zone. 10 seconds. The last door sealed as Yang made it to safety. The lights flickered as power was diverted to the containment fields. The explosions came in rapid sequence. Despite the fields, the ship shook. Smoke filled some corridors. Emergency systems activated, spraying fire suppressant. When it was over, parts of the diplomatic section were damaged but still intact. No outer hull breach had occurred. The containment fields had worked. In the aftermath, medical teams treated injured crew members and delegates. Most injuries were minor, cuts, bruises, and some smoke inhalation. Juwon called an emergency meeting with Marek and the remaining hegemony representatives. This was an attack on all of us, she said firmly. Someone doesn't want peace. Marek looked shaken. I assure you, Commander, the Council did not authorize this. I believe you, Juan replied. But someone in your government did. A joint investigation team formed, humans and aliens working together for the first time. Security Chief O led the human side. A hegemony security officer named Lorith represented their side. They discovered the bombs had been planted by members of a radical military faction called the Purity Front. They believed aliens should never work with lesser species like humans. 3 days after the attack, the investigation team made another discovery. Science Officer Yang found strange data in the hegemony military archives. Look at these sensor readings, he told Juan and Marek. They're from your long-range outposts at the edge of your territory. The screens showed unusual energy signatures, ships of unknown design moving at the edges of known space. We've seen these before, Yang explained, in old Earth transmissions from colony worlds that later went silent. Marek studied the readings. These match reports from worlds that disappeared from contact centuries ago. We thought it was natural disasters or civil wars. Yang shook his head. No, it's something else. Something that hunts spacefaring civilizations. He showed more evidence, patterns of disappearing worlds over thousands of years, always the same energy signatures before contact was lost. We've detected their scout ships at the outer rim, Yang reported, showing the evidence to the gathered human and hegemony leaders. Alone, neither of us can stand against them. The room was quiet as everyone understood the implications. There was something worse than war between humans and the hegemony. What are they? Diplomat Choi finally asked. We don't know their name, Yang replied, but they've destroyed at least 7 advanced civilizations that we can identify. They come every few thousand years, like a harvest. Juan looked at Marek. Both leaders recognized the truth. Their war now seemed small and foolish. If we combine your experience with our innovation, we might have a chance, Juan said. The hegemony has been in space for thousands of years. Humans have new ideas and approaches the enemy won't expect. Marek nodded slowly. Perhaps this is why your species developed so quickly. Perhaps you were needed. The peace talks took on new urgency. Within days, a mutual defense pact was signed. The hegemony agreed to recognize Earth as an equal power. Humans agreed to share their technological innovations. As Juan and Marek signed the agreement, crews from both worlds were already working together to prepare defenses. Former enemies now stood side by side against a greater threat. This alliance was forged in fire, Marek said as they completed the signing. Let us hope it is strong enough for what comes next. Juan nodded. It will be. Because it has to be. 1 year had passed since the peace treaty. The TSS Defiance looked different now. Its dark hull had new sections built with hegemony technology. Inside, humans and aliens worked side by side. Where enemies once fought, friends now prepared together. Admiral Kim Juan stood on the bridge. Her uniform had changed too. New rank pins showed her promotion. She had become the leader of the joint fleet. 50 ships followed the Defiance, 20 human vessels, and 30 hegemony warships. Status report, she ordered. Captain Lee Jono, once her first officer, nodded. All ships in position, Admiral. Defense systems at full power. The bridge was larger now. Human officers worked with blue-skinned hegemony crew members. They had trained together for months, preparing for this day. Long-range sensors detecting unusual activity at the edge of the system, reported Tactical Officer Baz Subin. Her console now had both human and alien controls. Something's coming. For months, they had tracked the approach of the ancient enemy, the ones they now called the Devourers. Old records showed how they had destroyed civilizations throughout history. They came, they consumed resources and people, then vanished for thousands of years. All ships, this is Admiral Kim, Juan said into the fleet communication system. Prepare for contact. Remember your training. The minutes passed slowly. Bridge crew checked and rechecked systems. Fighter pilots waited in their ships. Weapons officers monitored power levels. Then it happened. Multiple contacts emerging from hyperspace. Bai announced, her voice steady despite the danger. The Devourers have arrived. The main screen showed the empty space ahead suddenly tearing open. Dark ships poured through the tiers. They were huge. Black vessels, shaped like claws or teeth. They moved in strange patterns, not like anything built by humans or the hegemony. Juwan felt her heart beat faster, but kept her face calm. The crew looked to her for strength. All ships, battle formation Delta, she ordered. This is what we've prepared for. The fleet moved into position. Smaller ships formed a front line. Larger vessels positioned themselves to provide covering fire. The Defiance moved to the center, its massive weapons ready. The Devourer ships approached silently. They didn't respond to any communication attempts. They simply came forward, as they had done for thousands of years against countless worlds. They're in range, they reported. Juwan nodded. Begin Phase 1. The human ships fired first. Not weapons, but special devices developed by Science Officer Yang. They created energy fields that disrupted the strange propulsion systems of the Devourers. Disruptors active, Yang reported from his station. Their front line is slowing. Next, the hegemony ships moved into position. Their weapons had been modified with human technology. They fired precise shots at the now vulnerable enemy ships. The Devourers responded. Energy beams shot from their vessels toward the Alliance fleet. 2 smaller ships exploded immediately. Shields holding on all other vessels, they reported. Enemy weapons are powerful but predictable. This was the key discovery they had made during their preparations. The Devourers used the same tactics for thousands of years. They never needed to change because no one had ever defeated them. Captain Lee, prepare the quantum displacement drive, Juwan ordered. Lee smiled. Ready, Admiral. The massive drive that allowed the Defiance to shift slightly in space had been upgraded. Now it could affect other ships too. Targeting enemy command vessel, Lee reported. Quantum displacement in 3, 2, 1. Space rippled around the largest Devourer ship. It seemed to shift position, but not by moving. The space itself changed. Quantum displacement successful, Lee announced. Enemy formations disrupted. The Devourer ships, confused by what happened to their leader, broke formation. This was the moment they had planned for. All ships, attack pattern Omega, Juwan ordered. Focus fire on the displaced vessel. The combined fleet moved with perfect coordination. Humans and hegemony had practiced this for months. The Devourers had never faced enemies who worked together. The battle continued for hours. Ships were lost on both sides. The space around them filled with debris and energy discharges. But slowly the Alliance gained the advantage. Their command ship is breaking apart, they reported after a particularly heavy attack. The bridge crew watched as the massive enemy vessel split into pieces. The remaining Devourer ships began to retreat. Should we pursue? Lee asked. Juwan shook her head. No. Let them run. They'll carry the message back to their kind. When the battle ended, the Alliance had lost 12 ships, but the Devourers had lost more than 20, including their largest vessel. It was the first time in recorded history they had been defeated. As damage reports came in and rescue operations began, Juwan left the bridge. She went to her private meeting room, where Grand Admiral Zenith was waiting. Once her enemy, now her ally in battle. Your tactics were brilliant, Zenith said as she entered. His uniform showed scorch marks from when his bridge had been damaged. The quantum displacement was the key. Juwan poured 2 glasses of water. Your ships executed the attack pattern perfectly. We couldn't have done it without the hegemony's experience. They stood together by the viewport, looking out at the stars. Human and hegemony ships moved together, helping damaged vessels and collecting survivors. Your people have earned their place among the stars, Zenith acknowledged with a nod of respect. We were wrong about humanity. Juan sipped her water. Perhaps we needed each other all along. Your experience, our innovation. What do you think they'll do now? Zenith asked. The Devourers. They'll be back eventually, Juan replied. But next time, we'll be ready. Outside the viewport, a damaged human ship was being helped by two hegemony vessels. Crews in spacesuits worked together to make repairs. Just 1 year ago, they had been trying to destroy each other. The Devourers have existed for millennia, Zenith said. They've never been stopped before. Because they always found civilizations alone, Juan replied. Isolated, we're stronger together. As they watched, more ships gathered around the Defiance. The Alliance had held. The first test was passed. Former enemies now stood as united guardians of the galaxy. Admiral, came Baz's voice over the comm. We're receiving messages from other worlds. They saw what happened. They want to join the Alliance. Juan smiled. Tell them they're welcome. The more of us stand together, the stronger we'll be. The stars seemed brighter somehow as the fleet began its journey home. Humanity had not only survived, they had helped forge a new path forward for all spacefaring races. For the first time, Zenith said quietly, I believe the galaxy has a future. Juan nodded. And we'll defend it. Together.